guys, and welcome back to another video from Ashwin's Tech Talks. And in today's video, we're going to learn about nested for loops and while loops in Python. Now, in the previous video, I showed you how to use a for loop and while loop, but I never showed you how to nest them together and create some cool combinations. That's what I'm going to show you in this video. Now, setting that aside, let's get on with the lesson, shall we? So, as you can see in this code right here, I have two lists. I have a list called persons, and I have a list called restaurants. And in the persons list, I have some names: John, Marissa, Pete, Dayton. And in the restaurants list, I have some names of popular restaurants, such as McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, and A&W. Now, I want to create a program which outputs the following output that I'm going to explain to you right now. I want my program to say John eats from McDonald's, John eats from KFC, John eats from Burger King, and John eats from A&W. Now, once that sequence is done, I want my output to move over to Marissa and repeat the same process, and then move over to Pete, and then move over to Dayton. Okay? Now, how do I do this? In order to achieve this output, I need to use a nested loop. Not just any nested loop. I need to use a nested for loop, since we are dealing with sequence types, and nested for loops are best for two types of sequences. Okay? So let's actually get that arranged right now. So create nested for loops. Okay. Now, so we first have to call on our persons list, okay? So, as I said in the last video, we use I as our iterating variable. But today, we're actually going to change that, because we don't always want our program to use I, because then it will get confusing when we use so many loops. So, we're going to actually create a specific variable to the persons list. So, let's actually call this variable person. So, for person in persons, there we go. Put an S right there. Okay? Okay, so now we have a for loop right here. Now we need another for loop to access the list restaurants. Okay? So let's do the same process. So for restaurants, so for restaurant in restaurants, there we go. We got two loops right here. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you why we need this nested loop, okay? So, now let's create our final output statement. We actually print our output using the print statement, okay? So, print, we first do person, then we do comma, and then we do eats at, comma, restaurant, okay? Now, let's see what we get by running our program. There we go. See? John eats at McDonald's, John eats at KFC, and then it goes to Marissa, then it goes to Pete, and then it goes to Dayton. Now, it finally finishes at Dayton since we use the persons list and we use a nested loop. Okay? But let me actually explain to you the process. For every element, for every person in this list, in persons, it goes to a loop for every restaurant in restaurants. So for every person in this list, the program then accesses every restaurant in this list. And for every restaurant in person, it prints the person's name, so one element of the list, and then it adds this string to it, and then it adds the name of the restaurant to it, creating a fully fledged sentence, such as John eats at McDonald's. And that's how this works. So then it moves over. So after doing John for this, for McDonald's, John for KFC, John for Burger King, and John for A&W, it moves on to Marissa. And it moves on until it finally reaches the last element of the list, which in this case is Dayton. Okay? Okay, now let's move on to another example which actually shows the usage of nested while loops. Okay? So let's create a very basic program to demonstrate the usage of nested while loops. First, examine the two variables we have here. We have a student's score and the amount of money they have. Let's say their amount is in dollars and their score is in 0 in their latest trig test. Okay? So we're going to create a while loop for this program. So while score is less than 10. So right now, our score is definitely less than 10, as you can see right here, since it's 0. But we actually want our program to do a function while the score is less than 10. So let's say while the student's score is less than 10, we want the student to know the student needs to score higher. Okay? So let's say after the first trig test that the student gets inspiration to do better on the upcoming tests and study harder. So let's say their scores improve, shall we? So scores equals score. Let's say their scores increase by 1%, okay? Score equals score plus 1. Now, let's actually create another while loop which deals with the variable money. So while money is greater than or equal to 10, okay? So money is equal to 10 currently, okay? We want to tell the student, so let's say the student needs to earn more money, okay? The student needs to earn more money. This condition only works if money is greater than or equal to 10. So in order to actually make the condition false, we need to actually slowly decrease the value of money. So what do? We do the same thing to increase the score variable, but the opposite. We actually decrease 1. So we do money equals money minus 1. Okay? So let's actually run our program and see what we get, shall we? So let's actually run our program. There we go. We first got the student needs to score higher, and then we got the student needs to earn more money, and then it kept going that the student needs to score higher. So why is that? Well, let's actually examine our first while loop. So while score is less than 10, the student needs to score higher. But then after that's printed to the user, the variable score is added 1. So the score variable actually increases by an increment of 1 each time this occurs. Okay, so the score slowly increases and increases until it is actually greater than or equal to 10. Because this condition says that while score is less than 10, this entire code runs. But if the score value keeps increasing, then eventually it will get to 10 or greater. So once it gets to 10, Python recognizes that this condition becomes false and shuts down this entire code because the condition is proven false. Okay? Now let's move on to the second while loop and explain why we got this output right here. Okay? So, how did this happen? So, while money is greater than or equal to 10, the student needs to earn more money. But the money variable is slowly decreasing as well by increment of 1, okay? So this condition becomes false as well because it only prints once. So while money is greater than or equal to 10, it runs once because it gets to this moment right here, okay? The first time the code is run, the code follows these lines and then it gets to this line eventually. And then it prints this, okay? But then as soon as the program prints this statement, the value of money decreases by 1, which means this entire while loop can't work because this condition is proven false. So this can't work, which means this entire block of code is just useless at that point because it does nothing to the program and makes no change. So once the program runs once, that means this block of code actually disappears. It still stays here, but the computer does not run it. Okay, Python does not run this block of code. And then we keep getting this statement, the student needs to score higher, because the score variable actually increases until it gets to 10. That's why we keep getting this statement until it ends right here, because the score variable finally got to the value of 10. Okay? And that's basically how the while loop works. If this condition is true, this entire block of code works. If this condition is true, this block of code works. If this is false, this block of code will not be run. And when this is false, this entire thing will not be run. Okay? So be careful on how to define your conditions when using nested while loops. Okay? Okay, that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe and share the video to anyone who likes programming with Python. And until the next video, this is Bye from Ashwin Tech Talks. See you guys.